This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com. And today we're not going to be doing a wrestling interview, which we did do one earlier, if anyone wants to see. But we have a poet, an author, and a soterist, which is something new that I haven't heard of, as my dog wants to say hi because the fans love seeing my dog. But Charles Upton.
Esoterism is closer to what cats would understand, really, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But anyways, I saw you on New Thinking Aloud, which is a program that I watch that Jeffrey Mishlove, which I'm also probably pronouncing wrong. He was the winner, for anyone that doesn't know, of the Robert Bigelow $500,000 award for the best essay on what happens after you pass away.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in that subject. You're an expert in many religions, but first of all, we'll let you explain this esoterist term.
Well, it's okay. So basically, what I am is a Sufi Muslim, American Sufi Muslim, but I'm also a perennialist. It's another term for you, which means simply somebody who believes that more than one religion is valid, and that more than one religion can be valid and operating at the same time. Not every religion. I mean, you know, I wouldn't compare Islam and Scientology, for example. But you know, generally speaking, the major world religions all come from God. And esoterist simply means, well, their inner teachings or inner meanings to religion, which you know, can be called esoteric. And somebody who studies those is sometimes called an esoterist. You know, in Christianity, the most esoteric writer is probably Meister Eckhart. And, you know, in Ibn Arabi, in Islam, you hear of Ibn Arabi, he's, you know, as being esoteric. So it's, and, you know, in some religions, the esoteric is more on the surface, like Hinduism and Buddhism, or Vedanta and Buddhism. You know, it isn't such a separation between esoteric and exoteric, which means the outer part of religion, which has to do with, you know, rules and morality and things like that. And in the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the esoteric is a little, you know, distinguished from the outer part of the religion. So in Judaism, you get Kabbalah. In Islam, you get Sufism. And then there are various, you know, pretty esoteric writers and thinkers in Christianity. So I guess that's it. So.
And I understand you attended UC Davis for 4 days. Why is that? Why is that so significant that it's made?
I don't know why. You know, I don't. It isn't that significant, except that I just, you know, I ended up to be a self-taught kind of guy, and that's you know, it was more or less my destiny, and it took me maybe 4 days to realize that.
So have you always been interested in religion and kind of beyond normal things like you are?
Yeah. I would think so, because, you know, I went to Catholic school, and it's amazing what they used to teach in Catholic high school. That's as far as I went in formal education. And there was, you just to get exposed to these ideas of you know, metaphysics. You know, you hear about St. Thomas Aquinas and this, and it's sort of, maybe I didn't get a very exhaustive, you know, presentation of these ideas, but they get into you, and you see, hey, there's something more going on in reality and in the intellectual way of talking about reality than is apparent on the surface. And once you see that, get a sense of that, then it might attract you for the rest of your life, which it did. And then, of course, that was at the point where, you know, the 60s counterculture was developing. And so all the other religions, Eastern religions and stuff, were all coming to town and displaying themselves. And so I sort of went in that direction, you know, like a lot of people of my generation, and just, you know, looked around in that world. So, and that's been my interest ever since, pretty much.
And as far as your poetry, I didn't read any examples of that or see any videos of it, but what type of poet are you exactly?
Well, some people said I was the youngest member of the Beat Generation, but that isn't true because I'm too young to be in the Beat Generation. And I really, I'm not that kind of poet, although those guys influenced me. Yeah, to a degree, romantic, to a degree, symbolist. Those are terms that people who follow poetry will mean something to them. I don't know. I don't know what type. Maybe I'm not a type of poet. Maybe I'm just a poet who's like myself. That may be it. So.
And how much has poetry helped you with the ladies over the years? I have to ask.
Well, I mean, you get an awfully archetypal, amazing view of what the ladies are, what the lady, who the lady is, and you project that on the lady, and the lady is very flattered. But on the other hand, she says, "Can I live up to this?" And then you say, "Can she live up to this?" And so it's got an ambiguous effect,
Now, as far as your UFO research, which we do a lot of UFO interviews on this channel, when did you start becoming interested in that subject?
Well, that was one of the themes of the counterculture, the hippies, there were always hippies who believed that the space brothers from the Galactic Federation were here to, to teach us or whatever. And it was just coming in to the culture in the 60s more than it had before. Although certainly those big apparitions of UFOs, were more in the late 40s and 50s. But, it became sort of a meme, a cultural meme by the time I was interested in what was going on in the world. And then I guess the first thing I wrote up on it was in my book, The System of Antichrist, which was 2004. Actually, no, 2001. And I just felt that that's one of the, I was like going over the stuff that I learned from the counterculture and critiquing it, criticizing it, not entirely unappreciatively, but pretty intensively from the standpoint of traditional metaphysics, which is, let's say, the science of the esoteric. Another term for that is traditional metaphysics. So I was, from that standpoint of the great philosophers and the saints and the sages, what do we say about this new age and this counterculture stuff? So I went through a bunch of it, and one of the things I went through was the myth of UFOs, so which are getting so big these days. I mean, now we have two very important reports from the Pentagon in which the government is apparently changed their direction entirely in UFOs, and they say, before they were saying, well, there's nothing to see here, and there's nothing, that's probably all swamp gas or whatever the earlier debunking tendency was. And then, the Pentagon comes out and admits, yes, they are real, and we don't know what they are. And then just a month or so ago, the last Pentagon report came out, and it was detailing the terrible effects of close encounters with UFOs and aliens on people's lives and health, and not to mention, let's see, somewhere I wrote down a couple of the things that they said in that report. Let's see.
Yeah, because that goes against some of the people that have always said these things have never done anything to harm humans.
Yeah.
Where there is some evidence of radiation, people getting burnt.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
aircraft going down.
Yeah. Here's where it says, okay, the new Pentagon report on the negative effects of close UFO encounters on the human body and psyche mentions radiation burns, paralysis, brain damage, and then sightings of ghosts, elves, Sasquatches or spirits, abduction, eye injuries, electrical shocks, and even sexual encounters, which is essentially what Whitley Strieber finally admitted happened to him. and which sometimes result in death and, strangely enough, permanent healing in some cases. Now, what's interesting about this is that there's a Harvard psychiatrist who passed away some years ago, John Mack, I don't know if you know of him, wrote a book called Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens. He basically treated or worked with, maybe he has 100 cases in his book of people who have been, say they've been abducted by aliens. And he finds very similar things. Now, different thing about him is he thinks the aliens were a positive influence. You know, they're here to administer tough love and to teach us our lessons that we need to learn. So he was essentially pro-alien, but he lists the same kind of stuff. He says they produce physical and psychological scars ranging from nightmares and anxiety to chronic nervous agitation, depression, even psychosis, to actual physical scars, puncture and incision marks, scrapes, burns, and sores. And he says, as well as broken marriages and alienation of affection between parents and children. He observes that negative physical and psychological effects persist even in cases where spontaneous healing of chronic or incurable diseases occurs. So according to, the consensus, the emerging consensus of reports on these beings, they're very toxic to humans. And people like Luis Elizondo, are trying to make sense of this and saying, well, it's just that their technology is very advanced and strange, and close encounters with that technology are damaging to the human body, but they don't mean to hurt us, So if they don't mean to hurt us, why do they abduct us, and terrorize us? If they don't mean to hurt us, why did they rape Whitley Strieber, which is what he finally said. He said, I finally realized I got raped, literally, by these beings. And he was in pain for 20 years. He was damaged physically and psychologically. And so, let's call a spade a spade. These beings are bad news. And what's interesting about that also is you go on the web and you find, you go to Catholic sources and you find something called demonic vexation. Now, people have heard of demonic possession, which is the demon takes over, takes over and controls you. And there's demonic obsession, where you're getting terrible thoughts and impulses and stuff coming from you don't know where, and they're driving you crazy. Demonic vexation has more to do with physical attacks. But this is the list from a Catholic source of what demons do when they do vexation on you, which is cuts, burns, scratches, punctures, writing on the skin, bites, beatings, blows that leave bruises, swellings, bloody sores, broken bones, incisions on the skin, and illnesses with unknown causes and unknown cures. Obstacles also occur in the workplace and among personal relationships without logical explanation. Some people have been taken from where they were and transported long distances. In other words, abduction. So what has been reported for centuries of demons, and what is now being reported by the Pentagon of UFO aliens, are virtually identical. So I think it's time that we have to admit this. The Pentagon report has really corroborated the religious view of that aliens are demons. And so I think we have to at least take that seriously. And whatever they are, maybe you don't like that word. Well, we quibble about words, but they're toxic. And I don't understand people who may have actually been terrorized by these beings, have been abducted, like Travis Walton. Travis Walton had a horrible experience. Traumatized his whole life. And yet he's now starting to make excuses for them, as if for some reason he has to go along with them. Now, this to me is not natural. If somebody does something, some being or human or otherwise does these horrible things to you, why do you go along with them? Why do you say, well, that's interesting? Kidnapped by terrorists. I learned an awful lot. being kidnapped by terrorists. Gee, I hope they do it again. This doesn't make sense to me. I mean, where's our self-respect as human beings? So.
And he was terrorized, because I've actually interviewed Travis Walton, and he does seem to have some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder from whatever he went through.
Sure. Well, anybody would, and that's what both the Catholic source and the Pentagon and John Mack all basically say that too. So, but Whitley Strieber is still saying, but they're so fascinating. I mean, I was listening to an interview with Jeffrey Mishlove and Whitley Strieber that took place about a year ago, and Strieber says, well, we don't know what they are. And I think that's kind of great not to know what they are, because that makes everything more interesting and fascinating. If we knew what they are, it would be, would take all the fun out of it. I mean, no. If you knew what they are, it would scare the life out of you. People don't want to face how evil this is, and so they say, "Oh well, maybe they're, who knows what they are." If you face what they are, it's going to be tough, because you're going to have to realize how bad they are. And what's even tougher is if they start to realize that you have realized how bad they are. Then you worry about reprisals, Speaking of, you said this interview is not going to be about wrestling. Well, in a sense, it is going to be about wrestling, and it's a different kind of wrestling. It's St. Paul in one of his epistles says, I think it's to the Ephesians, I may be wrong, says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And I think that's exactly what these beings are, and we have to start asking ourselves, first, take them seriously, saying they're damaging to the human race. They're leading us astray in many different ways. I mean, one of the ways they're leading us astray is a new religion is developing, which says, oh, God didn't create us. We were created by the UFO aliens. We are their lab rats. And it's pretty hard to maintain any kind of self-respect when you think that you're the lab rat of such a horrible being, So, and what is spooky is that this religion, because that's what it is, it's, is being promoted by large elements of the military industrial intelligence complex. History Channel and everything else churning out documentary and movie and over and over and over again, pushing this idea. Now, why are they doing that? Particularly since it's the Pentagon itself admits that these beings are so destructive. What's going on? We got to ask ourselves why that's going on. So,
would you consider Dr. Stephen Greer a religious sect leader?
Well, kind of, yeah, I guess. Yeah. Well, of course, okay, he's got, and I haven't tried this out, but he's apparently got an app where it will teach you how to, I don't know if through the app you can talk directly to an alien, but in any case, it will also be involved in teaching you remote viewing, like was developed by the CIA at Stanford Research Institute and other spy agencies. And through this remote viewing, you can contact the UFO aliens yourself, psychically. And if he's pushing psychic contact with beings who do these horrible things to us and whose profile perfectly fits the traditional profile of demons, then what religion would you say that he is following? I'm not going to use the word. I'm just going to say, what would you conclude about Stephen Greer if he's trying to put people, on a mass level in touch with these kind of beings?
I don't know if he's doing it just for financial profit or if he actually believes all of this, because I've seen very little evidence. The pictures of the beings that he's presented are nothing conclusive, to say the least.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the question is, people have had experience, though, of having these beings come into their dreams or like pop into their bedroom while they're supposedly awake, and this after seeing something on aliens, after getting the idea of aliens in their mind, then it continues. And speak of the devil and he appears. So, however, in other words, I think what Stephen Greer is after is not a healthy thing. However, he may not be totally successful in going after it, which I hope he is not, but I don't think his intent is very good.
The thing that bothers me about him is he's insistent that they all have the same intentions and it's all only peaceful and to unite all of us, where there's clearly many different beings visiting us. You might be saying they're all demons, but I don't know. There seems to definitely be certain different types of visitors from the research.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is one of the big memes I see going around, not just in the UFO world. And I call it the good demons versus the bad demons, right? I mean, you get a video game where, maybe there's one side in the war that's more good, and you want them to win. But if you step back a little bit, look, they're all horrible demonic robots of some kind. Wait a minute, I mean, see, the thing is, you cannot evaluate the paranormal. I mean, okay, why are we interested in the paranormal? Well, we're exhausted by materialism. We don't want to think that matter and material realities is all there is, because it isn't all there is, and we're designed for more than that. And so we get tired of living in a materialistic world, and so when something paranormal happens, whatever it might be, whether it's a Sasquatch or the Loch Ness Monster or a UFO, we say, oh, there's more to life than I thought. Maybe it gives you a little sense of you got room, got a little room to imagine and to breathe, because everything isn't just matter. The problem is you cannot evaluate the paranormal based upon materialist assumptions, and you can't evaluate it based upon what it says about itself or the way it presents itself, because there's nothing to compare it to. What you really need is a sense of absolute reality. You need a sense of the source of all things, the source of the universe, the source of the human race, and what has always been called God. It's not, you don't have to use that word, but that's what we're talking about. You have to have a sense of absolute reality. And the one thing that the UFO aliens cannot do, because they present sometimes their own idea, well, we've got our religion too. We believe in the absolute. We believe in spirituality, and we will help guide you in this and this. Well, two things that I figured that they cannot do is they cannot present absolute reality as good. It's powerful and weird, but it's not good, because goodness, according to people who are attracted to and believe in the powerful and the weird, goodness is weak, right? There's no strength to it. It's only a surface niceness, whereas you strip off the wrappings of things and down in there where reality is, everything is powerful and weird, and I'm sorry, goodness is reality. The more good something is, the more complete it is, the more fully worked out it is, the richer and the deeper in every way. That's what goodness is, but these beings cannot present their absolute, whatever it is, as good, because they themselves are not good. The other thing they can't do, talk about esotericism. An esoteric teaching of all the religions, as far as I know, is that the human form is central. We are more than we know. We are a reflection in this world of all of the aspects of God, because he made us to be that. We are, where he most directly manifests in this world is right through the human form. And we're starting to forget this. We don't have self-respect. We don't know what a human being is. We'll, make ourselves available to any kind of experiment, whether it's carried on by scientists or UFO aliens, to change us into something unnatural that isn't human. This is what's going on. That's the Islamic call to prayer. I'll turn that off because I've still got time to pray.
Yes, because you've converted to Muslim, as some people have pointed out. That's the picture behind you.
That's the name of God, Allah, written in Arabic script according to the Shadili tradition of Sufis. So we need to have a sense that the human form is important and all important. And the UFO aliens can't give us that sense because they act by violating us, by degrading us. And you can't degrade somebody, you can't abduct them and subject them to humiliating and terrifying medical-like experiments and all the things they do to people, and then say, the human form is central. In fact, they say the opposite. They say, well, we have to have a human hybridization, alien hybridization project in order that human beings should all become half alien, because otherwise the world will be destroyed. And this is the only way we can survive somehow. I don't know how to explain that, but in other words, they want us to lose the human form. They wanted to lure us, away from the human form, and that way lies destruction. That way lies perdition. And in quasi pseudo-scientific terms, alien human hybridization is another way of saying demonic possession, where you're a human being, but also really you're a demon inside. That's what they're trying to do to us. So if we learn to maintain our self-respect and remember how important and how central a human being is and how rich and wonderful it is to be a human being, which everything is trying to make us forget. And if we can, understand what it means that absolute reality is good and fully formed and fully articulate and lovely and deep and meaningful in every way, then we will have a standpoint from which we can look at these aliens and say, are they doing that? Or are they doing something else, something, in fact, that violates all of that? So we need, and traditionally, the religions of the world are what gave us that sense of absolute reality as good and the human being as central. They're getting to be in kind of bad shape these days, and they don't work for a lot of people. But the truth, those truths are still in there. But in any case, we have to get to those truths any way we can, or we will never be able to evaluate what these aliens are.
So Pulsar Lights is wondering, and I'm kind of curious too, are you saying that if all aliens are demons, that you would consider Satan an alien, or how would you equate something like that?
Well, I mean, why call them an alien? The idea of calling them aliens is simply going along with the idea that they might be astronauts from other planets. And it doesn't look like they are, because as Jacques Vallée said in one of his books, that's not likely because there are too many of them. I mean, what are we in we're the only airport for aliens, from all over the galaxy coming here. No, there's just too many of them for that explanation. Besides the difficulty of getting here over vast distances, See, what's interesting is I say it's entirely possible to know what these beings are, and in fact, it's always been known. It's always been known. They're what the Muslims call the jinn. And the jinn, there are evil jinn who are essentially the same as demons. They're also, good jinn who worship God, and they're like the good fairies and the evil fairies, something like this. And the Christians look at them as fallen angels, demons as fallen angels, and but if you look at their profile, okay, they have obvious this, and this is more or less from Jacques Vallée, but from a lot of people. This is what they are. They do have definite physical effects. They can materialize. They can appear on radar. They can leave behind physical traces. But at the same time, they are profoundly paranormal. They do things that we don't understand how physical matter can do. And they have a deep psychic effect on the people that encounter them. And the other strange thing is that there are strange deception activities around them. This is a whole other part of the mystery, because Jacques Vallée wrote a book called Messengers of Deception, talking about all kinds of deceptive and suspect activities involving members of the intelligence community and who knows who around UFOs. And the question is, what is all this about? Now, if you want to look at that part of it, there's a recent Netflix original series called Top Secret UFO Projects Declassified. And this has, it's like the whole story pretty much of what the UFO myth is these days that is being developed by elements of the military, the corporate world, the intelligence community, and God knows who else. And it's got some good, factual material about, the history of the UFO phenomenon. It's worth listening to. But if you want to understand what kind of deceptions are being projected on us at this point, like I say, there needs to be a new branch of ufology, which I would call deceptology, because, incredible, impossible lies are being told about UFOs. Now, when I say, there's a lot of deception and lies being told about UFOs, some people will think, oh, you're saying that they're not real, that they're all a hoax. No, that's what George Noory thought when I was saying the same thing on Coast to Coast AM. He says, were you saying they're not real? I says, no, obviously they're real. But the deception has to do with, the meaning that is attributed to them for some kind of purpose of wishing to control large masses of people and change our way of viewing things from belief in God to belief in aliens. And if you want to see, a tour de force in propaganda and social engineering, just look at that Netflix series. It's, in fact, there are two aspects of the deception activities that are being laid on us that you can see when you look at that. One of them is they're impossible stories. Stories are told that could not be true. For example, Colonel Philip J. Corso, who wrote The Day After Roswell and stuff, he was talking about when he was a major at Fort Riley, Kansas. There was a day when a special shipment came in and it was put in a warehouse. And he tells this story in the Netflix series. And it was put in the warehouse. And since he was officer of the day, he got a chance to take a look at it. He was allowed, to view it. And so he went in and he was poking around and he said, no. He says, I came up to this wooden packing crate. And I said to myself, I wonder what's in here. Let's open it up, see what we got. And he opened it up, and what was in there but an alien corpse? Now, if the military had taken possession of an alien corpse, would they sling it into some wooden packing crate without any attempt to preserve it, without any guard on it, just sitting there for anybody to find? Anybody who would believe that would like, the traditional story is they would buy the Brooklyn Bridge. That's ridiculous. That could not be true. And once you hear a story like that told as true, you say, now, wait a minute, who is doing this and why? What the hell is this? There's another story. Rob Mercer tells the story on that Netflix series.
That's a valid point, though. They don't even have the thing refrigerated. It's just in a
That's what he says. That's just a wooden packing crate. I open it up, pried it open. I got a crowbar, pried it open, and wow, look at this! Imagine that. I mean, and you should have seen him laughing and cackling at us as he told the story, like saying, "These people are such idiots. I can tell them anything, can't I?" That was his attitude. Oh yeah, they'll believe anything because they're UFO nuts, right? They have no critical thinking. They want to believe anything. So you just feed them this, and that's worked out pretty well for these people who are telling these lies. People have believed absurd things, and so they get careless. They think, oh, I guess we'll never meet anybody who has half a brain in the UFO world, so we can tell them anything. Well, I'm sorry, that can't go on forever. This is too obviously wrong. And so Rob Mercer says, let's see, he was looking at his local paper, and he saw a classified advertisement which said something like top secret Air Force documents available to anybody who wants to take them for free, because they're cluttering up my garage, and I need to, I want to build a boat in my garage, so I have to get rid of these boxes. Something like this. So he goes and he picks them up, supposedly from someone who is a former employee of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And what does he find in them is all the UFO accounts, supposedly, all the UFO accounts that had been excluded from Project Blue Book. They're collected, but they weren't in the final report. Now how likely is that? Obviously, if someone is giving out his name and his whereabouts and his contact information, is telling everybody, come and take these secret government documents off my hands, he's going to get in trouble. And obviously this guy did not get in trouble. And so, this is one of the big, pieces of so-called information that became important in the UFO world. Well, now we have the secret government documents that tell the real story. And how likely is that, really? So what we got to do is listen to what people are telling us and say, just listen to it critically. Don't think you have to deny the reality of UFOs or go back to say it's all weather balloons and swamp gas. Just see, does this story make sense? The other thing that is a big part of the deception is you have contradictions, which are so total that they stun you. These are also from the Netflix series. So the Netflix series tells, the story of Travis Walton. Well, let's say one of the stories it tells is of the huge fleet of UFOs that fly over the Capitol building in DC in 1952, which made coast to coast headlines. There they are, they have appeared, and it tells so many stories of UFOs trying to make themselves known to us. For example, parking in the middle of a rural road, right in the middle of the road at night. So when a motorist comes along, they will necessarily run into this UFO. I mean, if we think that they're not trying to get our attention, why else do they dance around in the sky, make impossible 90-degree angle turns with impossible G-forces and appear and disappear and do all this? It has every indication of they're trying to get our attention. I mean, so the idea that UFOs, are very shy and secretive. Well, this is what Richard Dolan says. He says, and the interesting thing about UFOs is they apparently don't want to be seen. They don't want to be known. They're very covert. They're very secret. I'm wondering, why would this be true? And he says this in the same series where there have just been story after story after story of UFOs in your face. And he says, they don't want to be known. Now, this doesn't make sense. Either they spoofed him, they didn't let him know what the rest of the documentary was going to be saying. So when he came out, and they just interviewed him, and that's what he said. And then he looked like an idiot when what he said was paired with everything else in the documentary. But it gives more the sense of this is just a total contradiction. And one thing I've noticed about contradictions is if somebody can project a contradiction at you, just as a matter of fact thing, say A, say yes, say A, say B, which is totally contradictory, but just go on and that's just part of the patter, part of the spiel, and you don't notice the contradiction. At that point, your critical mind is switched off. You say, huh? If you accept that, then you'll accept anything, because you didn't, the part of you that says, wait a second, if you say this, you can't say that. That part is now deactivated. And so this is one of the techniques, I think, that is used to play deceptions on us. The other total contradiction in the Netflix series was Alejandro Rojas, who says, like Stephen Greer, apparently there are no reports of any negative effects on human beings from contact with UFO aliens. No reports at all. They're entirely benign. Now, he says this after Travis Walton tells this harrowing story in the same series, after Terry Lovelace tells an even worse, apparently, story, and after, we hear that the UFOs have shot down aircraft. And then Rojas says, but they're all, they're completely benign. So, I mean, this is another absolute contradiction, and it does not make sense. And how long are we going to put up with this kind of crap being laid on us? We just, because the whole thing is so amazing, even if they're extraterrestrial astronauts, that's outrageous. Or if they're demons or jinn from interdimensional beings, that's outrageous. And they're so outrageous that we say, well, if this is possible, then anything's possible. And the people who wish to lie to us say yes, and that means anything I say you can accept, because how do you know enough to disagree with me? Anything's possible, right? So they use that sense that this phenomenon just blows our minds. But we got to wake up and not let ourselves be treated this way, and get a little critical, ability back and say, what are we being told? And so I would suggest a couple of things. Anybody who feels moved to do this and is willing to look at that Netflix series, which is Top Secret UFO Projects Declassified, check it out. And if you see what I see in it, that there's so much smoke and mirrors, it just makes you ill. Somebody should get back to Richard Dolan and Alejandro Rojas and just say, excuse me, maybe I didn't understand you clearly, but it looked like what you said was a complete contradiction to what everything else was in that series. And, you may have a wonderful explanation for it. And I'm not accusing you of anything, but could you clarify a little bit what's going on here? Because we're puzzled. I mean, I think that's what needs to be done. And the more people that get back to these people, the more they'll realize they can't do this stuff anymore, that they've been busted. Okay. They need to know that they have been busted. That. Number two, if these beings are demons, which is a good bet. I wouldn't say it's proved, but if you read the literature on the demonic, especially demonic vexation, and then compare it to what John Mack says, what the Pentagon report says, you'll see, they're like that. And so next thing is, if they're that bad and if they're hurting us that much. Oh, speaking of hurt, I've been in touch with Christopher Green, Kit Green, who is, a very highly placed CIA physician, and he's, he's very much integrated into the scientific establishment of this country. He worked with the National Institutes of Health, and he's now at I forget which university, at University System, where he's acting as a physician. And what he's doing is he's trying to heal people who have been abducted by aliens. And he says, of my patients, he says, this is an email to me. He's also referenced in articles about the Pentagon report. I think he contributed to that report. But in an email to me, he says, 25% of my patients die within 7 years of having been, had a close encounter with a UFO. And okay, these beings appear to be what has always been called demons. If so, wouldn't it be a logical thing to say, well, we can't just let ourselves be, damaged like this. These are our enemies. We've got to fight back. We've got to wrestle a little bit, right? We got to fight back. Don't just let them walk all over us. Where's our self-respect? So how would we do this? We don't know. This is why we don't, because we don't know how the hell, because people, the military shoots shells at the UFO and they have no effect, and missiles have no effect. And so, you give up. Well, maybe they need to be combated on a deeper level, on a subtler level. Now, there is a Catholic priest who is an exorcist. And I hope, I don't know if he's going to appreciate my bringing his name up in this context, right? But I'm going to do it. Maybe, I'm sorry, Father Ripperger, his name is Father Chad Ripperger, Ripperger. So he's very upfront about being an exorcist and the philosophy behind it, and he's got a lot of very, very interesting videos on YouTube. So I'm saying, if anybody feels that they have been damaged by abduction and that they have serious after effects, and are willing to look at the possibility that these beings could simply be what have always been called demons by Christians, Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, and a lot of shamans and shamans, then perhaps they should look at some of Father Chad Ripperger's videos and see what they think, and perhaps contact him. Now, I don't know if he's interested in working with UFO abductees. He may not be. That's his business. And Catholic exorcists have their own criteria for deciding whether it's right to do an exorcism in a particular case, but he's free to say no, and but you're free. Anybody who has a real problem with the after effects of these beings is free to go to him and say, "What do you say? Do you think I'm a candidate?" I would definitely do this, because if they're this toxic and yet we don't even say, well, that means they're our enemies and we've got to fight them. We've got to fight back. People don't take that step. They just look at it and say, "Oh, yeah, that's weird. It's pretty weird. Very, very dark. Oh, well, hey, if this is, let us say, an invasion, of course, it's been going on for many centuries, but still, it's very intense right now. If this is an invasion, what are we going to do? Nothing. We got to do something, or we're kind of brain dead. We've already given up. This is where wrestling comes in, man. Because these beings are formidable, and they're not pleasant. They're not pleasant to counter. People are afraid of them. People are more afraid of them than they're willing to admit. And that's why they don't want to go against them, because they might lose, or they might get them angry or angrier than they already are. And so people say, let's not mess with it. Well, I'm sorry, the invasion is going on, and we got to do something about it. This is my opinion.
Someone has a good question here. What's your opinion on what crop circles mean? I mean, we've seen the bad kinds that are faked by people using the wood, but there's some that are very intricate and actually burnt into these fields or the ground.
Well, I mean, crop circles, I mean, I'm of two minds about this because, UFO manifestations have been seen in relation to crop circles, and yet they keep giving me the impression that they're created by some kind of advanced human technology that we don't know about. It's like, and when something becomes popular in the collective mind, like fractals, there's a big vogue in fractals, and then suddenly the crop circles now have fractals in them, and I just wonder, it does seem worth considering that there's some kind of human technology that we don't know about that's doing this. This is common. It's like magic lanterns, early film projectors. At one point, the only people who knew about them, and this is, of course, before mass communication, the only people who knew about them were people who had been to some scientific society in London or some salon in Paris where these things are demonstrated, and they say, well, in other words, the elite knew about them, or the society people knew about them, or the scientists knew about them, but generally they were not known. So somebody goes to one of these things and says, oh, this is interesting. So let's take this out to the boonies, to rural England or rural Europe where nobody's ever heard of these things, and then we'll be great magicians. And so they would do this, and they would do these magical shows using a technology that the people in the countryside had never heard of and never imagined. So maybe something similar is being done with crop circles. I don't know. I just thought to myself, well, what purpose could this kind of technology have served? It seems to put not a very strong pressure, but like a pressure on a large area. It doesn't plow up the earth, but it pushes the grass down and this. I wonder what that might have been useful for. And I said, well, maybe somebody's trying to develop a technology that could explode landmines from the air. I don't know. Are these very high hovercraft that can hover at 40,000 feet and are invisible, and then they are projecting this? I don't know, but it would be interesting, if you had something that could exert a slight pressure of a whole area, it would detonate all the landmines, So I don't know. That this is just speculation, I can't be sure, because there are paranormal stories of crop circles as well. So this is also a possibility.
Interesting question here. If they are demons and we can't kill them with firearms, how do you expect us to fight back?
With prayer, with very intensive and very well directed and very intelligent prayer, with the power of exorcism, with there's a whole series of tools that have been used by traditional religions against these beings. There's a tradition of exorcism within Islam called ruqya, which is effective against them. Now, what I don't know is if it can be effective against them when they appear in the sky to thousands of people. Usually, these forces, these powers are used when one individual is possessed or is obsessed or is bothered by these beings. And so the exorcist can often free that individual from their influence. The whole idea, though, if this is a collective manifestation, what I'm trying to do is interest the Catholic exorcists in asking that question, and so far they have not been interested in responding. I have to say that. So in a certain sense, I'm challenging Father Ripperger to say, maybe you need to be looking at this, or maybe exorcists need to be looking at this and determine what you have in your arsenal that might operate against these beings. Because at least we have to ask that question. So.
And as far as if they are demons, why do you think they need the spaceships, or are those all just figments of they're not actual physical spaceships? These are just visions or things like this.
Well, what they are is they're quasi-physical. I mean, the idea of spaceships is because, their major cover story for a long time has been, we are astronauts from other planets. So this is what they want to present themselves as. I mean, semi-humorously, I tend to say, at one point the demons got together and said, look, it's the 21st century now. We can't continue to appear as goats, okay? That's a little bit, retro, right? So let's come up with a new image. And Whitley Strieber provided them with a new image, or they provided him with it, which is the alien gray, which, as far as I'm concerned, first appeared in Whitley Strieber's book Communion. So the idea that they appear in, that they may have in their own world a reason to travel in vehicles, because they've always been, for hundreds and some say for thousands of years, the idea that these beings travel in vehicles has been part of the lore. Why they would need to, I don't know. Maybe those vehicles are something else in their world and only appear as vehicles in our world. I don't know, because what they do is they have the power to materialize. They're not material, or they're subtle material. They're not our kind of material beings. They're not what we consider to be physical, and yet they can materialize in a real way and affect our physical reality and become physical. They just can't stay physical for very long, because it's as if it takes too much power, too much energy to maintain this form in this world, and so they tend to go up in smoke and go back to their world. But they do have a physical component. You have to say that.
Very interesting stuff. So in your opinion, then you believe that aliens are demons. That's your conclusive theory after all your research?
Well, certainly a large number of them are. Now there are also beings who appear, remember, according to Islam, the jinn, who are the beings I'm generally describing, they're not all demonic. Some of them, worship God, and some of them are helpful. And so the world of the jinn has a vast number of different forms of beings. I think vaster than all of the species of plants and animals on Earth. It just, the variety is amazing. And so we will find probably that some of these beings are helpful. In fact, for example, years ago, I went to experience the psychic surgeons. Have you heard of them, of the Philippines, who can reach into your body and, with their hand.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that where Andy
rummage around and pull out something that shouldn't be there, some kind of tissue, and throw it out, and then now you're healed? I mean, they could really do that. I experienced them both in the Philippines and in California, because they used to come by a lot when I lived in California. And they have that power. It's an old power of the shamans, I think, shamans. But they work with beings, from the subtle material plane, and they work with beings that the Muslims would call the faithful jinn, who are, who make themselves available to help human healers. So there are positive beings, okay? But generally speaking, when we're talking about UFO aliens, and most of the things that are reported of them are extremely negative and fit the profile of demons. So what I say about the world that all these beings come from is, all right, it's like shark-infested waters. Not every fish in shark-infested waters is a shark, but that doesn't mean it's safe to swim in shark-infested waters. This is why the Christians tend to say everything in that world is demonic, which I don't literally believe, but I think that's sort of prudent, that's sort of smart, because, in other words, don't mess with that world, because there are forces in there that you can't dream of, and they can really hurt you, which is true. So.
And finally, I got to ask, you've been studying religion for a long time, since you were in college at least. What made you convert to being a Muslim?
Well, I was following Sufism. I wanted to follow, an esoteric way where you have, intensive spiritual practice. And that's what was there. That's what, a lot of the other religions came by, the Hindus came by, then the Buddhists came by in the counterculture. And by the time I was ready to make that commitment, it was the Sufis who were coming by. And so that's where I committed to that. But also, this goes back to a dream I had when I was like 5 or 6 years old, in which I won't tell you the whole dream, but I saw a couple of North African, I guess they were marabouts, or holy men, essentially equivalent to Sufis. And, they're dressed in white burnouses and they had black faces, And, essentially my connection with that world, I think, announced itself in that dream. I was a Catholic until 17 or 18, something like that. But as a child, I'd already seen that this was going to be part of my destiny through that dream. So.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. In terms of Islam, yeah, you really do have to be a Muslim to be a Sufi. But this does not mean that I appreciate everything that's done in the name of Islam. One of the other things I've been involved in is something called the Covenants Initiative. There's a colleague of mine, Dr. Andrew Morrow, who single-handedly, through immense scholarship, rediscovered the covenants or treaties that the Prophet Muhammad made with Christians and other groups of his time. And these covenants command all Muslims until the end of time, not just not to kill or rob or damage the buildings of Christians who are living in peace with Islam, or even prevent their Christian wives from going to church, but actually help the Christians rebuild their buildings when they fall into disrepair, and to defend Christians, defend them with force of arms. So it was very powerful. He was bringing out these documents at the very time when ISIS was developing, and we in the Covenants Initiative, I would say, arguably became the major ideological counterforce to ISIS within Islam. And so, that's my idea of Islam. You can find a lot of support for that position in the Quran as well. So.
And you just brought up dreams. I know you've studied dreams a lot. What have you found basically from your study of dreams that's most interesting?
Well, the dreams change according to what your spiritual connection is at a particular time. When I was with the Sufi order that came from Iran, in the Mutilations order, the symbolism of my dreams would be according to their symbolism, slowly but surely. So, some dreams are just, your mind trying to make sense of your experience on a different level. Some come from a higher world. If you dream of the Prophet Muhammad, they say, peace and blessings be upon him, that will always be a true dream. That's the story anyway. So there are veridical or true dreams that come from a higher world and are deeply revelatory and symbolic. And you can sort of hang your hat on those dreams. They really help guide you. And then some of them are just, and once in a while, dreams can be delusive. There can be, it's said in Sufism that dreams can come from God or from the angelic world or just from your own psyche or from the demonic world. So, all those worlds can communicate with us through the dream state. But the closer we are to maintaining our memory, unbroken memory of God, unbroken consciousness of God in the waking state, the higher our dreams will be, and the more we can rely upon them. So.
What do you think about the people that say when you have those falling dreams, it's really an outer body experience and you're falling back into the body when you have
Well, I mean, that's true. It's like I used to have out of body experiences. It's funny, when I joined the Sufis, they stopped, which is interesting, which is sort of saying that, the dreams that come from a high spiritual source are higher than the astral plane, higher than the astral projection and flying around, which is very interesting and very, very exciting sometimes. But there are higher things than that. But I would say, yeah, sometimes when you dream of falling, it could well be that your astral body is diving back into the physical body and hitting bottom. So, yeah.
Sorry, I had a malfunction that I couldn't get back on. I don't know if you have time to answer this, but if you do, it'll be the last
Sure.
question here. There was a fan that wanted to know about cattle mutilations. We did an extended interview with Linda Moulton Howe on those, but I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, they're pretty sinister. We just removed the genitals and the anus and maybe the eye. I mean, what the hell is that? I mean, I haven't studied that directly. There certainly seem to have some relationship to UFOs and the paranormal. Whether they're done by Satanist groups, I don't know. I can't really speak to them, because I haven't spent a lot of time studying them. So.
And for fans that want to look into your books or follow you on social media, where can they find you?
Well, I don't have much of a social media presence. I've got a website. My book, I should sell my book, shouldn't I? My book is called The Alien Disclosure Deception. Do I have it here? Yeah, no, that's not it. Oh, it's a different book. Okay, The Alien Disclosure Deception, The Metaphysics of Social Engineering. The Alien Disclosure Deception. You can find it on Amazon. And, that's got everything I've written on UFOs since 2001, and it's got, it incorporated a later small book called Cracks in the Great Wall. Because talk about esoteric, French esoterist René Guénon says, now at the end of this cycle of manifestation, the wall between the physical world and the subtle world is starting to break down, the Great Wall. And this initially lets in what he called infra-psychic forces. And I just looked at that and I said, UFOs as let's say described by Jacques Vallée, who's I think the best ufologist, they seem to pretty much fit what Guénon was saying. Thing is, though, first the cracks in the Great Wall appear in the lower direction and lets in, the dark and infra-psychic things. But later he says the cracks will start to appear in the upper direction. And this lets in the angelic energy that precedes the coming of what is called in some religions the Messiah, or it's the being that the Buddhists call Maitreya, the Hindus call the Kalki Avatara, Muslims call the Prophet Jesus, and Christians in the Christ of Second Coming, the Parousia. There are higher energies coming in too, because we can't, if we just look at this dark stuff, we get pretty depressed. That's not all there is, and that's only a tiny bit of what there is. Because if our intuitions are clear enough and our heart is pure enough, we will see the light descending from above at the same time, and realize that this stuff that's coming up, UFOs, the infrapsychic forces coming up from the underworld, all of this, it's just boiling up because the light is coming down, and that's what's stirring it up. And we need to focus first on the light. If we can intuit it, if we can feel it, then we'll know how to evaluate and what to do about the dark stuff, the UFO aliens, etc. So easier said than done, but it's not impossible. It can be done. So.
Yeah, well, it seems like more and more of these sightings are happening and more is coming out, so maybe more will be done.
I hope so. And, how do we recover our intuition of God? It's the religions used to give it to us in a sort of a simplistic way, but they gave it to everybody. It was like, of course God exists. Everybody believes in God. Now, it's much more plausible to believe in sinister spooks because there's so much in evidence. So how do we hold on to the sense that the absolute reality is good? This is what we need to work on. So.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts and research with us. It was interesting. We didn't get into too many of the fan questions, but maybe we'll, if you have time in the future, we could do it again and I'd get some of the fan questions in.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
Well, thanks a lot, and I'll let you close this off with whatever you want to tell the fans.
Well, I want to repeat that thing from St. Paul, which I put that in so many of my books in different contexts, the one that has to do with wrestling, right? Oh, wrestling. Speaking of the other thing in the Old Testament that has to do with wrestling is when Jacob wrestled, I think it was the stone of Peniel, I might be mistaken, he wrestled with an angel. And angels are tough. He dislocated his hip wrestling with an angel. Angels are very powerful. Now, his wrestling with an angel was like trying to come to terms with the reality of the divine, which is not easy. You say, is God real? Are angels real? Is this really happening? Can I believe in the good? And this is a big wrestle. So he ended up just dislocating his hip with that one. But what St. Paul says is more directly what we're facing now. He says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And let's get ready for that wrestling match. Let's not just sit here and let those bastards walk all over us. That's what I say.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please help me out and like this video, then click the subscribe and get notifications buttons so you don't miss any of my latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us on Facebook at the Hannibal TV for more live streams and videos.